great in your building, and I'm going to give you some strategies for being sure that your real estate stays on par with these new ventures into markets. The second thing is that these guys are launching new brands, so it's not just new entrants into the market, and there are a lot of those, but also the national guys are starting new brands. There's the nation's second largest group, Learning Care Group, who is La Petite, Child Time, Tutor Time, Children's Courtyard, Montessori Unlimited, Creative Kids, and their new STEM brand, Everbrook. They're doing a huge building campaign for Everbrook. So even the companies who have operated under brands historically in the past are now building new buildings, new, shiny. It's their opinion, and evidence would support this, that new and shiny is very attractive to today's parent group. So it just makes it more important for us to be sure that we're on par with that when it comes in. We're seeing today new construction over moving into existing buildings and leasing, so leasing or buying. After 2009 and 10, there were a lot of vacant buildings, really nice ones, and that was a huge area of opportunity for people. So a lot of people moved into real estate that may have been childcare, maybe not, but that was a big area of opportunity. Today, most of that has been repurposed, so those opportunities aren't as strong as they used to be. So most people are building, and again, that also supports the theory of new and shiny and what parents are looking for today. We're seeing a lot of our clients renovate their existing sites, and this is again a feature of needing to be sure that you are keeping up with the new things that are going on. There have been real big investments into existing schools, and I'm one that thinks that you really need an overhaul of your real estate in the look and aesthetics and the exterior and your landscaping at least every 20 years. I'd love to think we could all do that every 10 years, but somewhere in that time frame, really need to find a way to fund a pretty big overhaul of your real estate and keep up with the trends that are going on in the way that it looks. Lots of movement in either a different type of branding for your real estate or rebranding your existing real estate. So some really interesting concepts going on in signage and interiors and tour stops for parents, and just the way that we communicate through our real estate what we're actually providing to parents. So a big umbrella concern that I always talk about is that I think we do phenomenal things in this industry. We're not the best at communicating those phenomenal things to parents, but people are finding interesting ways to do that through the look and feel of their real estate. So that's exciting. There's a lot of money chasing our industry in real estate. And what I mean there is that while we, for about 10 years, have had the institutional buyers just pounding us for the kind of quality businesses that they want in childcare, pretty soon after that, institutional noticed that and started pounding us for the real estate that was associated with that. So that's still at an all-time high. Pricing is high there. We did see, so a year ago, I would have said to you it was the highest pricing we had seen ever in the industry. We saw a little shift downward from that about a year ago when interest rates went up, but not much, not significantly. We're still pretty high in what people are getting for their real estate today. So that's all exciting for people. If you're exiting, mainly. If you're buying, you know, makes it a little more challenging because there's a good bit of competition for quality assets in the industry. So overall, very, very optimistic about what's going on in real estate and the opportunities for you guys. So that's what we see happening. Let's talk about, we get this question a lot, you know, should I own my real estate or should I lease my real estate? I'm going to give you some pros and cons of both, but let me just say that I'm a fan of real estate ownership. I believe that over time, you know, real estate takes its ups and downs like other things, but over time, I don't think that real estate actually crashes. You know, we had some parts of the country that were over, prices were over where they should have been, and those did take a dip but are going back up. But I just think it's a good, safe investment. So I'm a fan. I'm a real estate owner of some childcare real estate, and I like it as a strategy. But my big picture decision about whether to lease or own really is what else can you do with those resources? So to the extent that you have as much resource, and by that I mean money, as possible, then continue to own your own real estate. So I'm going to jump over to the owning part here first before we talk about leasing. The reason I like owning is that it gives you control over what you do. Landlords can be great. You know, they're just another partner, and partnerships can be tough as well. So when you're in control, life's just a lot easier. It does use resources, and a lot of it, like we said, it builds a long-term asset. So your investment in that real estate, like I said, will typically go up. There's some tax advantages to owning your own real estate. And it's a possible growth asset. What I mean by that is that, first of all, it's easier to borrow money if you own real estate and you're going to buy real estate. It's not a barrier to borrow money for businesses anymore if you have the right financial situation. But investors and lenders love when you own real estate. The other thing that we're helping some other clients do, and we just have this going on for the first time with a 2-site client. It was typically reserved for bigger companies that, you know, 10 schools or more with very nice real estate and high cash flow. But today we're helping people sell their real estate to some of our institutional investors as opposed to individuals, and get the money that they need for growth. So they could use it to grow into other pieces of real estate. They could use it to buy other businesses. So it's becoming a very strong growth asset as well. If that's something that you're interested in, again, we think it's pretty new for smaller companies, but we've got something under contract right now we're pretty excited about, and as long as that gets done, I'll have a different different story to tell you guys in the next couple of months. So let's move over to leasing, because leasing certainly has its advantages as well. First of all, if you lease a property, the flexibility that you have with that to make a decision about your property is greater. It's not unusual for someone to move into a market with a new school, and 20 years later the demographics have changed and the neighborhood or surrounding area has changed from a young family to a older maybe retirement area, or even more of a business area. So when that happens and you lease, of course, it's much easier to move. It leaves resources available for other things. Maybe you use those resources to buy or start new businesses, and you reserve your funds for that and don't try to put it into real estate. It also gets you into properties quicker, and you know, your cost to go into new growth is lower. So those are the things that we feel like are significant in making that decision. So I want to share some numbers with you guys, but here are my qualifiers. So there are a lot of different situations you can be in with your real estate. Maybe you own it, maybe you lease it, and if you own it, you can pay yourself rent or not. You can pay yourself zero, or you can pay yourself every penny the business makes. It's really just a tax situation, because most people would hold that real estate in a separate company, but it doesn't really matter. So I want to give you some assumptions that we're going to use when I give you some metrics on where I like for your real estate cost to hit. First of all, if you lease, I'm assuming that when I give you a rent number or a lease number, and this could be the same as if you own, but it's in a net format, a term that you'll hear if you develop your own leases, or you're working with landlords. Net means that the cost is net of 3 other costs that relate to your real estate, and those are your maintenance, your insurance, and your property taxes. So when I say in a net format, it does not include those. So if you're in a lease and it does include some of those things, maybe you know what part of it is just for the rent for your real estate, what's for other costs, we can help you figure that out a bit. But the numbers I'm giving you are just for the benefit of leasing or owning the real estate. I'm giving you numbers that are on there's a pretty wide range of numbers on the percent of rent to revenue, and we'll talk about that, but I'm giving you a number that's pretty consistent with a newish or consistently remodeled building. So let's say the building is less than 10 years old, or you've made significant reinvestments in it to keep it looking 10 years old along the way. So those are the numbers I'm going to give you, but then I'll give you a wider range if you're outside of those. If you own your real estate and you're just paying your mortgage as opposed to leasing, I'm assuming that the numbers I'm giving you work with what your mortgage payment is. So it could be a lease that you're paying to someone else, it could be a lease payment you're paying to yourself, or it could be your mortgage payment, but no other real estate cost in that number. So hopefully that makes sense. Now we're going to do some math, so work with me here a little bit. I know you guys are not accountants, old bean counters like I am. We love these kind of things, but occasionally we'll have a client say they do too, but that's certainly not the norm, so you're in good company if that's not. Okay, here are my benchmarks. I like to talk about some, most every number that I give people for a benchmark is based on a percent of the revenue that you can earn. We get calls a lot from people, maybe they're thinking about building a new building or leasing something, and they'll say something like, can I pay $200,000 a year for rent? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, how much money can you make? Because theoretically, you can pay any amount as long as you can make enough money to support that. And I have to say that an issue in this area is the most difficult issue for us to help clients navigate around. If they have built a building or committed to a lease that's over the amount that they should be spending given their situation, and by their situation, I mean, what market are you in? What tuition rate are you charging? How big is the building? Basically, how much gross revenue are you earning? If you can earn enough gross revenue, you can pay anything for real estate. So we've worked with clients in Manhattan and California, and theirs are off the charts, but they get $400 a week tuition rate, so it works. So I'd just like to be sure that everybody understands those things. So let me give you my benchmark on this. So the first thing I want you to do, and I'm going to give you a real live example after this formula. So just bear with me for a minute. I'm going to talk through it, and then I'm going to give it to you logically, and then we'll do an example, and you guys can ask some questions at the end if anything's not free. Not clear. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to figure out if you were 70% full in your building, I want you to figure out how much money you're going to make a year. How much gross revenue, tuition, other charges. But we've got some simple math here that we like to use. It's not perfect math, but it's pretty close, and it's simple enough for people to use quickly. This is what we use when we're evaluating real estate costs for people. We're advising people, and we are valuing people's lease and real estate. So our quick down and dirty way to figure that out is we like to take your 3-year-old tuition rate, because we consider that a median rate. This isn't always true if either you don't have one or the other extreme end. So if you don't have an infant toddler population, or you don't have an after school population, might be skewed a little bit, but still I think it's a good quick benchmark. And again, if these numbers don't work for you for some reason, just reach out and let us help you individually. So I like to start with your 3-year-old tuition rate. It could be weekly, could be monthly, doesn't matter as long as we do the math right. I want you to multiply that by your license capacity, and I want you to use your real license capacity. Well, let me backtrack on that for just a minute. I want you to use your true license capacity as long as you could actually put that number of children in your building. Let me give you my exception. In some states, Florida is one, there are people who are grandfathered at 25 square feet per license capacity. You are never going to put that many children in your building. I hope they didn't do it back whenever. That was everyone's rule. But what I don't want you to do, though, is adjust your license capacity just because you choose to put a certain age group or certain number of children in your building. I want you to truly know what the maximum opportunity is for you in the building. So use the real thing, unless there's something crazy like what's going on in Florida. And so I want you to take that 3-year-old tuition rate times your license capacity. If it's weekly, multiply that by 52 weeks. If it's monthly, multiply it by 12. And if you stopped right there, that would say if my building was 100% full of full-time 3-year-olds, this is how much money I would make a year. That would be a nice, beautiful world, right? But what I want you to know now is if you were 70% full, what would that number be? So I want you to take the 100% full number, multiply that by 0.7. This is what it says logically. If every child in the building were a full-time 3-year-old and we were 70% full, this is how much money we would make a year. So let me tell you why I like 70% full. I like for people who, pro forma out a new school or, well, you're in a certain situation. I would like for you to be able to break even at 50% occupancy. I believe that, and this is tougher to do in smaller buildings. It gets easier the larger your building gets. But in a perfect world, I'd like for you to be able to break even at 50%. At 70%, I feel healthy now because I believe that operationally you can put about 15% on the bottom line, which in my opinion is the minimum that allows you to reinvest in your school. You've got to buy a new bus and a new piece of playground equipment. You need to build some cash flow so you're not doing the where's my payroll coming from juggle constantly, because you need to be grounded enough in that cash flow to operate your business. So I like to benchmark at 70%. What I believe happens over 70% is every new tuition, that money goes almost completely to your bottom line. You've got your main expenses in place, your staff is in place, maybe you have to add another part-time person or a little more food or supplies, but your basic costs are covered. So I like to benchmark at 70%, and that's where I start with people. So again, I want you to take your 3-year-old tuition rate times your capacity times either weekly 52 or monthly 12 times 0.7. That says this is how much money I would make a year if I were 70% full. And then our median benchmark is 15% of that for rent. But let me give you a wide range. I've seen this go as low as 8. I've seen this go as high as 19, but I caution people pretty much about going or planning to go over 15. I just feel a lot more comfortable at 15. I do work with some new clients who will budget a brand new school for the first or second year at 16, maybe 17. There are some providers who will go up to 19%. But if you think about this with me, if I'm saying we're a 15% bottom line industry for reinvestment, and I want your benchmark to be 15%, you're at 19 or 20 or 25, you've just sucked up the extra money that I believe you need to be financially healthy. If you go down below that number, if you've got an older building, it might be 12, it might be 10. Your trade-off is that you're going to be spending more in maintenance because it's an older building. You're going to be spending more probably in utilities. But I do like 15%. I've been arguing with my team here, I got to be honest, because I really like 13%, but they talked me into 15, so we'll go with that for now. Now, let's do an example. Okay, so here's our formula. We've got a school. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but I keep seeing my photo drop in and out. But anyway, if you can't see me, hopefully you can see this example. Okay, we have a school and we want to figure out how much money they're making if they're 70% full. So in this school, we've got a $190 weekly tuition rate for a 3-year-old. Our capacity is 180 students. This is weekly, so we've got 52 in here. And we're going to multiply that by 0.7. So you can see that the answer is $1,244,880. I could have chosen a round number, right? Make our lives a lot easier, but that's not reality. And the way we got that, again, was multiplying what's in parentheses under it. Now we're going to take that number, the $1,244,000, and we're going to multiply that by 15%. Again, you can see that math under the number, and the answer of what we can pay in rent for this building annually is $186,732. Again, just for rent, no other cost associated with it. Okay, so maybe you're looking at this and your numbers aren't exactly that. Here's some strategies. Here's some things you can think about doing. The first thing we want to do, again, you guys heard me say that the biggest issue we see is a matchup of what you're charging and what you're spending on real estate. So some people will build gorgeous real estate, very expensive, land costs are high, but they're in an area where either they can't support the tuition rate that they need to pay for that, or they aren't. So look at your revenue structure. Are you charging what you can charge in that market? Because unless you can rework your real estate costs, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, the only other strategy is to raise your rates to support what you're spending on your real estate. We're going to spend a lot of time on this at our Thrive event. There is a webinar on our website about tuition rate structures, and sometimes more importantly, discounts and other charges that can get you farther toward your goal of revenue than the tuition rate. But that's the first thing to look at. Are you at the place you need to be on your tuition rates? Are you using your space wisely? So are you using that capacity the way that you could best use it? You know, we're starting to see more people minimize their infant space, although there's a huge boom. If you're not seeing that, then let me know, but I'm hearing that all across the country, a real boom in enrollment for infants and toddlers, which just says to me that people are optimistic about where we are economically. And so it's a bit hard to want to limit those because they're your feeder program. Obviously, most people don't make money in infants and toddlers. Most people would lose a bit, but they come along with siblings and they do feed your other programs. Enroll. I mean, your school needs to be, if this percentage is off, maybe you're in a place where 70% isn't going to get it for you to come within that parameter. You need to be 80 or 90%. I would prefer that you were at 80 or 90% and that money was going to the bottom line, but might not be possible. But be as full as you can in your building. That's what it's all about, driving the revenue. If you're not in the right market range, then maybe you renegotiate your lease rate or terms. So what I mean by that is, first of all, I like for you just to pay less rent. So that's the first thing to ask if you approach your landlord. And I'm a landlord, so you know, I hope no one approaches me, but now I'm on the different side of the table with you guys, and I want you to have the best rate you can. So maybe you go to your landlord and you ask for reduced rent. Offer up that maybe you would sign a longer lease in exchange for that, because landlords really don't like the idea of empty buildings. So if you have a couple of years left on your lease, maybe you're willing to sign a new 10-year lease, but maybe in exchange for that, your landlord would reduce the rent for you. But there are some other strategies that you could negotiate with him or her. One thing is terms. What if you keep your rate the same, but you minimize your escalators, the amount of rent that you go up annually, or some leases are every 5 years. So maybe you reduce those, or maybe you get your landlord to pay your property taxes or part of your maintenance or insurance. So there are things that you can do, or maybe you do a conjunction of those things to get the numbers in the right range. So a renegotiation of where you are with your lease terms. I'm going to jump down to the last one and then come back up to refinance. Another one is I mentioned that I think that there needs to be a significant reinvestment in your real estate every 10 to 20 years. Ask your landlord to do this for you. You can ask them to do it for increased rent if you're willing to pay that. It's an easier way than going to the bank and borrowing that money, especially if you don't own the building. You know, let your landlord put that money into it. My tenant actually just did this to me. And I was happy to do it. They asked me, I don't mind sharing the details of this with you guys, but they wanted to invest $150,000 into my building. They're going to do new hardwood floors. They were going to do some new landscaping. They actually moved some walls around and did some rebranding. And I want my building to be in great shape. So they approached me, asked me to invest the money, agreed to pay me more rent based on that. I just refinanced the mortgage and built it in and wrote them a check. So I think that's a fabulous strategy for anybody that wants to put significant money into someone else's property. And then the last one, I'll jump back up, is if you have an existing mortgage, it's a good time to look at that and see if rates are still pretty low. And maybe you can build in some reinvestment into your property if you're concerned about new and shiny coming in and competing with you. These are all strategies that we're happy to advise you guys on individually. I will say that these are very specific to each person and their situation, what area of the country they live in, and what the situation is with the particular age of their building and condition. Like I said, call us for help. We're happy to talk to you guys through whatever your situation is. Feel free to jump in with questions over on the question bar. I'm going to tell you guys as you're doing that, and the team will get them over to me here. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the 2018 webinar series. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. We got our webinar series started in 15. You can pick these up on our website. The 2015 series was everything operational. So there is the tuition rate increase webinar that I mentioned. There's one on accounts receivable. So it's just, that one was built around major themes and financial themes in operations. Last year was built around valuation, which we had a lot of fun doing since that's our thing and our work. That was around what is your business worth and what's your real estate worth. So there's some other good real estate component webinars there. This year was on everything real estate. So again, summing this one up with the basics of your strategy for your real estate. And about 10 minutes before we got on this, because we've been thinking hard about this, I decided what we're going to do for 2018, and we're going to have a focus on staff and everything staff, because wow, is that the biggest challenge that our clients are facing right now. So I'm thinking to start that off with cost control and how we manage that, but to build in a lot of content around developing strong teams, how to hire, what we pay for benefits, how to train, maybe a little bit about how in the world we deal with the culture of this workforce that so many people are struggling with right now. So let us know what you think about that. I think that would be a interesting place to go. So love the staff idea. Okay, I've got comment on that. So we'll probably, you know, if you tell me you love something, I might call on you to help me, and we'll see if we can get some good content around that. Let me pick up questions. Okay. Yeah, this is a tough one. I've got another client in the same. I wish I had a great strategy for this one. So someone's got a really difficult landlord. It's a tough one. It's just like, you know, like I said, it's just like business partners. I know great partnerships with landlords. I've got a couple of clients who have some difficult relationships going there. Is it a possibility to try to buy that real estate? That's a possible strategy. Is it a possibility, and we can help with this analysis, is something we're doing with someone else. They got a couple of sites so that this makes it a little bit easier. We're having one of our institutional real estate investors actually approach that landlord and ask to buy the real estate, just hoping that, you know, we can turn that relationship around. It's been a really difficult one. That's a tough one. I think that's the best I have right now. How do you use your formula with part-time students? Good question. So this actually ignores whether students are full-time or part-time. So when we talk occupancy, well, we're going to do this a good bit at our Thrive event, and we can also talk this next year when we do our next series on staff. The way that we're calculating occupancy really ignores whether students are part-time and full-time, and here's the reason I like it. So there are really two methods. There's a predominant method of calculating occupancy, or called FTEs, full-time equivalents. I'm sure that all you guys know it, and it's how the industry really calculates occupancy, and it goes like this. Every full-time student, you count 1. Every part-time student, you count 1/2. That would include after-schoolers. You add those up and divide that by your license capacity. That gives you an occupancy. So let me say that again with real numbers. Let's say you have 50 full-time students and you have 40 part-time students, and you're licensed for 100. So we're going to count the 50 students as 1 each. So we've got 50 FTEs there. We're going to count the 40 part-time students as 1/2 each. So we've got 20 FTEs there, full-time equivalents. So there are 20 of them because there are 40 who are part-time. So we have 70 FTEs, or 70 full-time equivalents. If we're licensed for 100, I'm doing easy math now, so I don't have to get the calculator out, then we're 70% full. Here's what I don't like about that method for calculating percentages and benchmarking. It ignores a lot of things that can get people in trouble, basically. So one of those things is, what if you are letting a significant number of children come 1 day a week or 2 days a week? Maybe they're just in the morning. Maybe you have 20 staff children. Maybe 10 of those are free, and the other 10 are half price. So I think that sometimes it's a good thing to know your FTEs, but it ignores some things that might be getting you in trouble. Again, so you might say you're 70% full, and maybe you are, but what if you made some changes in those areas to be sure the revenue was there? So the count, to me, is less important than the revenue. The reason I like the revenue method is it ignores a lot of tricky things that can get us in trouble. Are we charging the right amount for those part-time slots? Are we discounting too much? Are we Do we have the right registration fee? When we're just looking at the total amount of money we need to bring in to pay that rent, then we can figure out the best ways to get it. Am I charging the right tuition rate? Are my registration fees correct? How much of my revenue can I discount and still be financially healthy? That's something that we see being an issue more and more and more, and we're starting to develop some content around that. So my methodology really ignores whether students are full-time and part-time. It just says, here's the amount of money I need to make this rent or mortgage payment work. So hopefully that helps with that question. Certainly jump back in here if that didn't quite get it. Okay, I got a question around property taxes that I will take. Well, that's a tough one. So we have this conversation a lot too, because there are certain parts of the country where property taxes are drastically different than other parts. So the question is, do you adjust your rent to make up for that? And it's a good question. So, you have all-in facility costs, and in some places, property taxes can be literally 10 times what they are in other places. And it is a big factor, and that number has to come from somewhere. So if you can manipulate your rent or mortgage payments so that it absorbs some of that, so in other words, it's less than 15%, that would be my first choice for you. What I don't want, again, is for it to come out of your bottom line. If most property taxes are 2% and yours is 6%, doesn't sound like a lot, but again, if we need 15% at a pretty healthy occupancy just to reinvest, then 4% of that's significant. So yeah, in a perfect world, I'd like to see you spend less for your real estate. That they typically don't go in opposite directions. So usually if you have, you're in a place where property taxes are higher, usually the real estate's more expensive too. My best idea would be that also usually you can charge higher tuition rates. So we're happy to look at that mix with you if that's a challenge and that's causing strain on your budget. Yeah, so question to explain a bit more about if you own your real estate and how to manage that within your company. So mainly this is a tax consideration, and I'm going to say that your best advisor, I hope that you guys have a very creative, good CPA that understands your personal situation completely. We do get a lot from clients that's hard to find, and being an accountant, I can talk about us. We, as a group, don't tend to be the most creative, flexible people, but I like somebody with some creativity attached to it. In general, people will hold their real estate in a separate company than their business. And again, it's a tax issue. How much you pay yourself in rent is really just a tax issue as well. So if your CPA were to say to you, it doesn't matter, you're equally okay if you earn this money in your business entity or your real estate entity, then, pay yourself the 15% if you like. They will typically have an opinion, though, of which entity should make more money from a tax standpoint. And it really is, it really doesn't matter in your financial picture. I want you guys to know what this market rent number is, because I want your mortgage to be no more than that. So know that what you're actually paying out is within that parameter. But what you choose to pay yourself, you can pay yourself zero in rent on your business side, or you can pay yourself every penny you make, and it's really, it has no bearing really on the value of your lease or your real estate. When we work with clients to value their companies and value their business. Then their real estate, we adjust the pricing for the real estate and the rent is then the basis for what the real estate's worth. And now I'm getting into valuation a little bit, so that's a little bit tricky. But we would impose a market rent at the numbers that we come up with. So the numbers will be in the range of 12 to 15% typically. We base that on the condition of the real estate, the age of the real estate, the zoning, what's in the area. There are a lot of different factors, but the basis of it, again, is what the business can generate and afford to pay. So that's a little bit contrary to people's, historically, what the appraiser said or what things sold for in their neighborhood. If there's a business in a building, then what that business makes or can make is the basis of what that real estate is worth. So a little bit of a different concept, but just for your purposes, on your financial statement presentation, you can pay yourself whatever you want. So that's not a factor you need to be concerned about. I think I have gotten, Carrie, do you have any other questions I'm not seeing here? Okay. I think I have gotten your basic questions answered. We really appreciate you guys being with us. Again, it was a fun series to do. It's not the most exciting topic that we have. It's a necessary evil, really, for you guys to be sure that this part of your business is in good shape. We will look forward to and would love your feedback on staff issues for 2018, but I don't think we'll have to look very far. Again, we're excited to see those of you who will be in Nashville next week. In Nashville, we're going to announce our next big event, and those of you who are not coming to Nashville, we certainly want to see you there. We're so excited about our new February event that we're putting together. So we'll leave that hanging out there until next week. And thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.